Good morning, everyone. Hello. Welcome to day one of the 5th Asef Young Leaders Summit. We are so happy to have you all here with us today. We also have an audience on YouTube. We are live streaming this morning's session, so welcome to everyone from all across Asia and Europe who is joining us today. We are in for a very exciting morning, an exciting rest of the day. So I will not talk for too long, but I am Freya Chowpool from the Asia Europe Foundation. I'm the youth project lead, so I'm really happy to have you all here today. And I will be the master of ceremonies throughout the project. So on that note, I am excited to hand over to our wonderful host of this project, the University of Salamanca, to guide us through the welcome remarks for this morning. So, Professor Raul Sanchez Prieto, Vice Rector of the University of Salamanca. Thank you very much.
My name is, as said, Raul Sanchez. I am the Vice President for International Relations at the University of Salamanca, so good morning to all of you. I welcome you face-to-face to this face-to-face part of the 5th Asef Young Leaders Summit at our university on behalf of our University President, Professor Ricardo RIVERO. It is an honor for our university, which has so many ties with Asian universities and Asian countries, to host this year's edition of the Asef Young Leaders Summit. I would like to introduce you to Mr. Javier PARRONDO, to my right, which is Director General of Casa Asia, and also Asef Governor for Spain, and also to my left to Ms. Reka Toja, which is Director of the Asef Education Department. We will also watch at some point a video message from Ambassador Stefano, which is Secretary General of the European External Action Service. But I give you the floor to Mr. PARRONDO.
Good morning. Gracias, Vice-Rector, Reka. I would like to warmly welcome you all to this Youth Summit organized by Asef in collaboration with the European Union, the External Action Service, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, European Union and Cooperation of Spain, and the University of Salamanca, as well of course, Casa Asia. I'm very honored to open this forum and be part of such a relevant example of people-to-people exchanges and of public diplomacy. And I could not have thought of a better venue than this university. I think that, as Reka mentioned yesterday, this idea of organizing such a meeting was conceived in Bangkok last year, and since then, both our teams, Asef and Casa Asia, have working hard to make this happen and be a success. In this regard, I would like to thank both my team in Casa Asia and Asef for the work done and for the passion put in this meeting. The relationship of Casa Asia with Asef was established since the inception of Casa Asia 20 years ago in 2001. And throughout this period, we have been bringing together the Asia-Pacific continent closer to Europe, and particularly to Spain, and vice versa. One of the milestones of this relationship was the support to Asef in the organization of 3 programs in Madrid in 2019, the Asef Journalist Seminar, the Asef Cultural Festival, and the 9th Model ASEM, which is a kind of young leader summit, but in a more reduced format. And these 3 meetings took place in the margins of the 14th ASEM Foreign Ministers meeting held in Madrid. And also, I would like to highlight the importance for us of the 44th Asef Board of Governors that took place last July in the framework of the Spanish chairmanship of Asef. The Board of Governors is the most important governing body of Asef, and as mentioned, took place in Spain last summer. The previous board in Europe was 5 years ago, so it was an important occasion for us. and for the organization as a whole, since a strategic plan was adopted, a compass that is supposed to guide the organization in the 3 coming years. Casa, for those of you who are not familiar with it, is a Spanish public diplomacy organization made up of 3 levels of the administration. At central level, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs; at regional level, the regional government of Catalonia; and at city council level, 2 city councils, which are Madrid and Barcelona. Just as Asef is the public diplomacy tool established by both Asians and Europeans to complement and contribute to the ASEM process. As you know, war in Ukraine has resulted in many changes in our daily lives, but it has also had an impact in regional organizations such as Asef. The Russian Federation was suspended in Asef, and now the ASEM process, which is a kind of umbrella of Asef, is on hold. Asef, nevertheless, is still active and vibrant. This event, for example, used to take place in the margins of the heads of state or heads of governments meeting. These meetings are no longer taking place because there is one member who is not part of the organization. So we are somehow reinventing the usual formats of Asef to adjust to the war in Ukraine. Now it's time for me to thank the University of Salamanca and the availability shown when we proposed to them to host this event. Being one of the historic European universities in Europe, founded in the 13th century, it has done a remarkable job in recent years in promoting Asian studies. And you will have the opportunity also to visit the Spain-Japan Cultural Center, created in 1999. So, in short, this is the ideal place for us to host this meeting, and I thank you, the Vice Rector and his team, for all the work. Regarding the program that brings us together on this occasion, the title chosen for this year reconnects us in a way when the one dealt with in its 3rd edition. The 3rd edition of the Young Leaders Summit has title Ethical Leadership. It is worth recalling the themes chosen for each of the previous editions, as it helps us understand how the fields of interest change as society evolves. For example, access to employment and entrepreneurship, which are issues of utmost relevance for young people like you, were the topics addressed in the first 2 editions. The 3rd was dedicated, as mentioned before, to ethical leadership, while the theme chosen for the 4th edition was conditioned by the global impact of the pandemic. The title was Sustainable Development in Post-COVID-19. This year's title, Leadership in Society 5.0, is an invitation to think and learn on multiple aspects of the ethical dilemmas and challenges presented by technological advances nowadays. This is why I mention the connection between previous edition and the current one. Although this time from a different perspective, that of a developed digital society based on massive data storage, automatic systematization of processes, and the generation of mechanisms called algorithms that make decisions based on previously programmed criteria. The digital society that is taking shape poses, therefore, enormous challenges, since it endows human beings with unprecedented capabilities to generate changes which are beneficial for society, while at the same time its potential for misuse entails threats and risks for the preservation of certain values and rights of people and society. These summits offers you the opportunity to address and discuss in a face-to-face format the issue that you have been learning about in the previous online phase. Among the risks and negative elements of these new technologies that require ethical answers, we offer here issues such as misuse of personal information, deepfakes, lack of oversight and acceptance of responsibility, ethical concerns of artificial intelligence, etc. On the positive side, we use terms such as ethical thinking, electronic privacy has a right, accountability, transparency, etc. Coping with these ethical concerns will require a multidisciplinary approach, as well as the development of ethical frameworks and guidelines to ensure the responsible development and use of digital technologies and artificial intelligence in our society. Just to finish my intervention, I am sure that this summit will be unforgettable for you all because of the relevance of the contents included in the program, for the networking that I'm sure you will create among you, and for having the chance to live in a city that reflects modernity and tradition. It is always a pleasure to return to Salamanca, and I have no doubt that many of you too will feel always engaged to this city for its charm and vitality. Thank you very much.
Insights, and now the floor is yours, Ms. Reja.
Thank you so much for the warm welcome remarks, Vice President Raúl Sánchez and Director General Javier PARRONDO. It's a real pleasure to be here, and thank you so much for hosting the 5th ASEF Young Leaders Summit. Indeed, as Javier said, we couldn't imagine a better venue for talking about the future than a university that reflects and blends traditions and modernity so well. And our Executive Director, Ambassador Toru MORIKAWA, was also very much looking forward to this event and join and meet you in person, but circumstances entirely outside his control prevented him to come here today in person, but he's online with us, and I would like to invite him to deliver also his welcome remarks to you.
Thanks, Eka. Professor Raúl Sánchez Prieto, Mr. Javier PARRONDO, the Chair of the Board of Governors of Asia Foundation, Director General of Casa Asia. ASEF various 5 young leaders, colleagues. Warm greetings from the Asia Foundation, Singapore. I really regret not being able to join the event in person, but still delighted to greet you online. The Asia Foundation is proudly presenting the 5th ASEF Young Leaders Summit, taking place between 12th to 16th September, hosted by the University of Salamanca. ASEF is a platform that connects young people across Asia and Europe, applying a 360-degree approach on leadership development and community engagement. Self-leadership, you. Team leadership, we. And societal leadership, for all. In this edition, we explore the topic of Leadership and Society 5.0, with 100 young leaders joining from over 50 countries in Asia and Europe. The Society 5.0 concept originated from Japan, my own country. It describes a human-centered society that balances economic advancement with the resolution of social problems by a system that highly integrates cyberspace and physical space. Societal challenges have always been around, but there is a fundamental difference between the past and the present: the speed of change. It took thousands of years to shift from agricultural society to industrial society. It took another couple of centuries, the industrial society, to become information society. Now we are living in the industry 4.0 era, but rapidly transitioning into industry 5.0 or society 5.0, where the virtual and the physical world increasingly integrates, and technology is increasingly used to solve societal challenges. There exists the reason why the leadership at a different level is important. Asef Young Leaders Summit 5 will explore what kind of leadership is needed for Society 5.0 and how Asian and European young people can prepare together. This project was made possible thanks to the support of many individuals and several organizations. Asef would like to thank everyone who contributed to this endeavor. First and foremost, we would like to thank our co-hosts and co-organizers, colleagues of the University of Salamanca, Professor Raul Sanchez Prieto, Vice Rector for International Relations, Dr. David Donkel Abad, Head of the Master's Degree in Eastern Asian Studies, Dr. Teresa Teher Martin, Assistant Professor, colleagues of Casa Asia, Mr. Javier Parrondo, Director General, and our chair of the Asef Board of Governors, Ambassador Emilio de Miguel Calabia, Director, Ms. Yasmin Paricio, Coordinator of the Politics, Society, and Education Department, Mr. Angel Alangren, Executive Advisor to the Director General, and colleagues of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, European Union, and the Corporation of Spain, Mr. Javier Salido Ortiz, Director General, Ms. Ana Andres, Desk Officer at the Deputy Directorate for Southern and Eastern Asia. We are also thankful for the student and youth organizations who support this project in various ways. The ASEAN Youth Organization, the Erasmus Student Network, the Student Think Tank for Europe-Asia Relations, the All China Youth Federation, the European Students Forum, and the European Law Students Association. Last but not least, our deep gratitude goes to, of course, to EU for its steady support to Asef and its projects, including this one. I wish you a fruitful event ahead. Thank you so much. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your intervention and for your interventions. I had the privilege to open the online part of the 5th edition of the Young Leaders Summit at the beginning of August. It was a pleasure to do so, as it is today to see you all face to face in Salamanca. I will not repeat the same wording as in August. I would like to begin by thanking Asef, particularly, of course, Ambassador MORIKAWA, for granting us the opportunity to host the Young Leaders Summit in Salamanca. I would also like to express our gratitude to Mr. Parrondo for the support provided by Casa Asia in organizing this event. And my special thanks also go to Dr. David Oncel and Dr. Teresa Tejeda, our two local organizers from the University of Salamanca, for the excellent work they have done in the past months. I appreciate your efforts in bringing this very important event to the University of Salamanca. So, now I would also like to stress once again that for us, for the University of Salamanca, with its more than 800 years of experience in higher education, it is an honor to host and be part of this Young Leaders Summit organized by Asef. The program proposed here addresses key aspects of the society we are moving towards. In the program, we see reflected the values promoted by both Asef and also by the University of Salamanca: cultural understanding, international cooperation, and of course, the promotion of our future leaders. and their working ethic pathos. So you, future leaders, you will have to obtain a balance between economic progress, sustainability, and the resolution of social problems through a system that integrates cyberspace and physical space to a large extent. And to conclude, because I have said I will be very short, to conclude, as the host of this 5th edition, and on behalf of the whole university community of Salamanca University, I wish you a very fruitful conference, a very fruitful meetings, and hope that you all gain a valuable experience for your future, and that you also enjoy our university and our jovial and vibrant city during these days. Welcome to Salamanca. Thank you very much. Okay, I have been told that we have to another video entrance at the end of this intervention. It is, of course, Ambassador Stefano SANNINO with the Secretary General of the European External Action Service.
Estimados colegas y amigos, dear young leaders from Asia and Europe gathered in the beautiful and historic Universidad de Salamanca. It is an absolute privilege to speak to you at the start of this 5th Asia-Europe Youth Summit, and I deeply regret that I was not able to exchange with you in person. You all know that our world is going through a rough time, facing existential challenges. The way they will be addressed or not addressed will shape our future for good or for bad. We must recognize that our decisions or inactions have far-reaching consequences, which will affect mainly our future generations. In our search for solutions in an era of rapid technology advancements, global interconnectedness, with regulatory and global governance vacuums, leadership should, as an imperative, be ethical and forward-looking. This must be our compass to guide us towards a just, inclusive, and sustainable future. Society 5.0, a concept that originated in Japan, envisions a human-centric society empowered by the fusion of technology and humanity. It emphasizes the harmonious coexistence of advanced technologies and the respect of values and the well-being of individuals. It is up to all of us to bring this vision to life, to steer our societies towards a future where technology serves as a tool for social progress. In a recent blog post on digital diplomacy, the High Representative Josep Borrell repeated that the degree to which the world will be rules-based or power-based matters more than whether it will be bipolar or multipolar. And he added that nowhere does this apply more than in the digital space. I would like to briefly elaborate on what are, in my view, some of the most important features for ethical leadership in a 5.0 society, namely integrity, inclusiveness, sustainability, and the conscious deployment of emerging technologies. And all these elements are built on a key fundament, education. At the heart of ethical leadership lies the principle of integrity, the unwavering commitment to honesty, transparency, and accountability. By cultivating a culture of trust and integrity, we inspire others to do the same and create an environment where ethical decision-making becomes the norm. Ethical leadership also requires us to be aware of the impact that our decisions have on all, notably on minorities and those in poverty. Leadership in Society 5.0 is about fostering a sense of responsibility towards humanity. At the European Union Foreign Affairs Council in June, the 27 member states agreed that a proactive EU digital diplomacy must ensure that these and other fundamental values are protected, and that a rules-based approach should prevail over power-based dynamics. Secondly, about inclusiveness. While harnessing the potential of technology, we must ensure that it does not aggravate existing social divisions, but instead acts as a bridge to equality. By integrating different perspectives and actively involving all stakeholders in decision-making processes, We create a society where every voice is heard and valued. The idea that the internet should be a tool under the control of states leads directly to making the internet a tool for control of populations, rather than a source of innovation and freedom of expression. The EU and its partners are right to resist this approach and must continue to do so. The next feature is sustainability. Ethical leaders must embrace sustainability as a core principle. Climate change, environmental degradation and loss of biodiversity, resource exhaustion, all pose enormous challenges to our planet. To secure our future, we need to embrace sustainable and resilient practices and prioritize the well-being of our planet over short-term and short-sighted gains. Through responsible leadership and conscious consumption, we can build a society 5.0 that is not only technologically advanced, but also environmentally conscious and regenerative. As you know, the green and sustainable agenda is a top priority for the European Union. It is also a central theme in our cooperation with our Asian friends. We have already set up many green EU-Asia initiatives, alliances, partnership programs throughout the region, and there are more to follow. This goes also for our digital cooperation. In our relations with partners, we promote a fair model for data processing. Just like with our critical raw material partnerships, we are not aiming simply to grab the data produced in Africa, Asia, or wherever, and get value from it back home here in Europe. Our European model is about nurturing the development of digital economy, which supports local innovation and adds value for our partners. In pursuing ethical leadership, we should not overlook the ethical implication of emerging technologies. Artificial intelligence, automation, big data have enormous potential, but they also raise profound ethical questions. Leaders must ensure that these technologies are developed and deployed in a way that respects human rights, privacy, and dignity. We need to establish a robust framework and rules that protect against misuse of technology while promoting innovation and creativity for the common good. Not so long ago, we were told that any attempt by the European Union to think about rules for artificial intelligence was simply a threat that could kill innovation. Thankfully, that discourse has shifted, and many, also in the Silicon Valley, are now awaiting the entry into force of the European Union Artificial Intelligence Act. Meanwhile, the European Union has been working closely with Asian partners to ensure a human-centric and trustworthy technological evolution. The focus on concrete deliverables that will foster a safe, secure digital space and shape a set of standards that could be used globally is the key. We now have digital partnerships with Japan, South Korea, Singapore, and more initiatives in the pipeline, of which many in the ASEAN region. Finally, at the basis of all this is the good education for all. More than ever before, we need to equip all our young people with knowledge, skills, and values necessary to navigate the complexity of the modern and fast-evolving world. By incorporating ethics and critical thinking into our education system, we empower future generations to become leaders capable of properly addressing the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead. The European Union support to education in many Asian countries and the student exchange programs like Erasmus+, scholarship between the European Union and Asia, have increased access to quality education, promoted educational inclusivity and cross-cultural understanding. Dear young leaders, Asia and Europe have historic bonds and contributed immensely to the world's cultural, scientific and economic heritage. This provides you with a unique platform for collaboration that can shape the trajectory of Society 5.0. You are the torchbearers of change, and this forum offers you a unique opportunity to advance intercultural dialogue and cooperation. use the diversity of your background and experiences to reflect and come up together with solutions to address these global challenges and to bridge the gaps between regions and population. Seize this occasion to discuss, to explain, and most important, to listen to each other and to cement another brick in our joint path towards a society that leaves no one behind. This is what multilateralism is all about. I wish you an interactive exchange and look forward to hear about your recommendation. And I would like to give my warm thanks to the Asia-Europe Foundation, to the Spanish Presidency of the European Union, and in particular to Casa Asia, to the city of Salamanca, and of course to the university for organizing and hosting this great event. Let me wish you all a successful event and a fantastic time in Salamanca. Thank you.
So thank you very much, and once again, welcome to Salamanca. Enjoy your time in this city, enjoy your time at our university. So thank you very much.
Hello, hello. There we go. Thank you. Sorry about that. Thank you so much, Professor Raul Sanchez, for your welcome remarks to us, to Mr. Javier Parrondo and Ms. Rector. If I can invite you to take your seats here for the subsequent program. Thank you. And I'd also like to acknowledge that our deep gratitude to Ambassador Stefano SANNINO, particularly because Asef's contribution to the 5th Asef Young Leaders Summit would not be possible without the financial support from the European Union. And so we are very grateful to them for getting you all here today as well. So I am happy to now move on to the next part of the program, which is our keynote message from Professor Yuko Harayama. This keynote message is on the concept of Society 5.0 and the role that young leaders play in that itself. Professor Yuko Harayama is the Professor Emeritus at Tohoku University. She's also the co-chair of the Board of Directors of the Japanese Association for the Advancement of Science, and she previously also served in the Cabinet Office in Japan. So a warm welcome and thank you to Professor Yuko Harayama for this keynote message.
On the concept of Society 5.0. It's my honor and pleasure to share with you, all of you, this idea bringing from Japan. Before starting my talk, I'd like to say a few words about myself to explain to you why, by myself, I have to talk about Society 5.0. Personally, I'm graduated from the University of Geneva in economics and education studies. My interest in research was to understand the process of innovations and the role of sciences. And then I moved to Japan to take the position of a professorship at Tohoku University at the School of Engineering. There, I was interested in working and really about the science, technology, innovation policy. And from my research topics, I have been invited by the Prime Minister Koizumi to take a position at the Council of Scientific and Innovation Policy to guide Japanese government's guiding for the science technology policy in 26-28. And from Japan, I moved to Paris to work at the OECD at the Directorate of Science, Technology, Innovations. And here I was not only national policy, but globally coordinating policy about science, technology, innovation around the member countries of OECD. And back to Japan, I have been invited by Prime Minister Abe to take the full-time position at the Council of Scientific Innovation in 2013. And here you see the link between what we call Society 5.0, because my main task at the Council was to really prepare the drafting fifth science technology basic plan in Japan, which will cover 2016 to 2020. So during this work, we have been working hard to make kind of new ideas about formulation of scientific innovative policy, and where we see the coming this new concept of Society 5.0. So I will invite you to go back to 2015, at the time of its inception. Compared to today's situation, it was really at the beginning of digital transformation. So we see coming huge power of digital transformations, and in particular empowered by AI. And we expect that this technology will be reshaping our society and our way of living. But we did not yet how and what could be the in-depth impacting the society. But mainly it was kind of tech-led transformation. And also we see coming connected and networked societies because of the internet, and we see the move of going global was really irreversible. And also at the same time, ever increasing sphere of human influence through science technology innovations. That means we see the new breed of technology like genome editing technology or neurosciences developing really in a high level. And we see really not only in a challenge in terms of science technology, but transforming society and also impacting on ourselves. But we did not yet how in depth. Let's be changing our way of being. Again, at this moment, 2015, we have been surrounded by many uncertainties, including geopolitics. So that's where the situation when we started work drafting our fifth science technology basic plan. So with my colleagues, our way of doing this business was not just doing as business as usual, based on the traditional formulation of scientific innovation policy. Usually we try to capture what's happened by the past and making kind of planning and writing technological road mapping, and also focusing on some framework condition for innovation. It was a traditional way, but we see the kind of need to make kind of new approaches for scientific innovation policy. Goal being enhancing preparedness for the unforeseeable future, as I described just before. And also so many global societal challenges surrounding us. So we have to address these global and societal challenges. And also what we do, which type of decision we do today will be a huge impact on the future generation. So we have to be confident about responsible actions for future generations. And again, in terms of social impact, we need to have more inclusive approaches. So from this thinking, discussions, we decided to put society at the heart of formulation of scientific innovation policy. And then, again, we will be not dictated by technology, but we will be using this technology for the well-being of the society and human being. So how to catalyze the power of digital transformation? One of the key questions. Because we have been conscious that increasing value are created by deploying and combining information. And also at the society level, became strong user and consumer of information. Look at our everyday life at work, in public space, at home, and in private. Anywhere you go, you are intensively using information. And also, our dependency to connectivity seems to be very irreversible. And impact being that we are changing the way we impact each others. So this is some kind of impact we may foresee, and we can think about what could be the next. So by the end, we have formulated our 5th Science Technology Innovation Basic Plan, which covered 2016 to 2020, just starting by describing the changing context and our goals. And also the first really chapter really for us was preparing the next future industry and society. Here you can find the above, the very Society 5.0 have been really formulated in this chapter. So now we were talking about Society 5.0. So you can consider this Society 5.0 as a concept proposal to guide Japanese science technology innovation policy within the framework of the 5th Scientific Basic Plan. But our intention was not only focusing on the Japanese context, but to make use of this concept as a global understanding of the future society. So I will shortly describe basic principles, kind of guiding principle of Society 5.0. As I already mentioned, the way to formulate, to foresee the future of science technology innovation, not focusing on technology only. So the main changes, main shift at the Society 5.0 thinking is the shift from a technology-driven approaches to human-centered approaches. Of course, we'll be taking advantage fully of the power of science technology innovation. So society should be backed by science technology innovations, including, of course, taking advantage of artificial intelligence, big data, IoT, robotics, quantum technology, and so many new coming technologies. But at the same time, we see the fundamentals for society is really having common share value that we have to respect in names of openness, sustainability, and inclusiveness. And formulating future society is not the affair of technocrats or some politicians. We see really the power of all citizens, and within the guiding principle of Society 5.0, we said we have to take everybody on board. So working together. And also doing this exercise, by doing that, we see we are not isolated now in 2016, 2020. We are kind of results of our past actions. And from the beginning of human being, we have been working together with technology techniques and shaping society and society shaping new technology. So we try to capture this process from the beginning and by revisiting the notion of progress in the human history. So to start with, we have been identifying, hunting, and gathering society. We have been living at this moment, at this period, kind of in symbiosis with nature. Because if you are taking too much from the nature, you'll be not able to ensure your sustainability. So from the beginning of society, human society, you have to be conscious about the sustainability with the future environment. Then not satisfying to be mercy of the nature. Human being have been working on the nature, where you see the coming agrarian society, we call it Society 2.0, and organizing much more better and working together. And we see the beginning of humanization from the beginning of agrarian society. And later on, we have been able to master power. That means we have been able to use not only human power or animals' power, but creating ourselves. Then you see the coming industrial society, we call it 3.0. And this society have been able to introduce new concepts like mass productions or new way of working. And now, later on, today, where we are is information society, we call it 4.0. And we see the compared to previous society, we see the increased value of intangible and network and information. So where we are today, and what's next? What's coming next will be, we call it 5.0. So society 5.0 is not yet really described or planned. It's something we have to invent. We have to create ourselves based on our past experiences and accumulated knowledge and technology and science. But it's up to us to really design, formulate better society for the next step. So this is the idea of the Society 5.0. So I just summarize by saying that goal of Society 5.0 is to advance science, technology, and innovations. Of course, we have to achieve economic growth, but not only economic growth, but at the same time, well-being, and using digital transformation as an enabler. Also, we have to address societal challenges, in particular in the context of aging society, like in Japan. But also we have to take account of challenges induced by digital transformation because of its may rise new risk, and we have to address all these challenges. And also not only foreseeing future of your nations, but we need to contribute to the global prosperity. So we are aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals. And also what is key about today is to contribute to the better shaping the governance framework for digital transformation. So to summarize and formulating in the policy terms, we can say Society 5.0 is a society where the necessary goods and services are provided to the people who need them at the right time and with the right amounts, regardless of age, gender, location, language, or other limitations, or fulfilling and comfortable lifestyle where everyone can receive high-quality services. And this society will be already seeking about the coexistence of people and robots or the technology, including AI. And it could be able to really providing customized services, and if possible, to eliminate inequality in access to services, but also increase opportunity for game changers. So foreseeing what's new next. Since then, many interpretations have been presented. For some, it is Society 5.0 equal to cyber-physical systems. And for some, it is digital transformations. For some, they say it's a combination of IoT, big data, AI, and robotics. And some say it's a data-driven society, and so on. So I feel comfortable with all these interpretations. If it is compatible, if respecting the guiding principles, as I discussed before, that means human-centered approaches backed by the power of SDI and the sharing value of openness, sustainability, inclusiveness, and taking everybody on board. And then, just looking back 2-3 years from now, back to now. So we have experience around the world with the COVID-19. And I would like to say what's impact on Society 5.0 thinking. So just to summarize in few words, we say COVID-19 was imposing a new rule of the games. We have huge constraint on the mobility, and the person-to-person relations have been disrupted, and stopping many social institutions working as usual. At the same time, this COVID-19 push ourselves to move to accelerate digital transformations and sharing data and science in the sense of open science, and also connectivity with the surveillances. And imposing to act differently, virtual substituting partially physical contact, and at the same time, we have been pushed to rediscover the sense of community and solidarity, and assessing at the same time what is essential to focus on. And the key driver to come over COVID-19 was, again, role of science technology innovations and also preparedness for the events and taking responsible action for the future generation. To sum up, we have some kind of lesson learned from COVID-19, just checking with a guiding principle with a Society 5.0, I would say human-centered. I think this kind of thinking is more than ever before needed. And more than that, we need to have additionally human touch with. Of course, society-backed science technology innovations, we had to really having strong investment in science innovation to understand COVID-19 and to develop vaccine, therapeutic, and diagnostic tools, and also to understand the impact of COVID-19 on our society and human being. Of course, value of openness, sustainability, and inclusiveness were very crucial for us because sense of community was at the heart of all action under COVID-19. And also, the keyword, everybody on board, was very crucial since we saw increased inequality and socially divided due to COVID-19. So this some kind of lesson from COVID-19. And lastly, I would like to mention what's the experience with the ChatGPTs. Since last year, it became kind of a new practice to use to just consult, to search something new, or to check, to consult, to seek the unknown, and to chat. So this is, quickly became our new practice. And advantage is that it is facilitating knowledge generation in some sense linearly. And also response, not only text, but multimodal response is possible. But at the same time, the use of the practice of ChatGPT inducing some new practice like question response mode of thinking. And you are becoming more and more on your assistance. And also by doing this practice, seek to search, to check, to consult, to seek the unknown, to chat through ChatGPT, you'll be probably losing a critical thinking and also passivity in your attitude. So some lesson learned back to our experience just now with ChatGPT. The key message, human-centered, again, I think it's more than ever before needed. And additionally, we need to enforce human agency to keep the dignity of human being. Society backed by science, technology, innovation. And really, we need to have more investment in science, technology, innovation to understand what is human intelligence and also to create collective intelligence. So again, human agency and human-centered approaches. Of course, value of openness, sustainability in COVID is more than needed because it's the foundational of human society. And also, again, everybody on board is really needed because we need to rebalance the dominance of tech companies and also take the voices of everybody to move ahead in the future society. So what next? We need to really ensure that we have to have socially responsible actions. It is to better shape future society for the future generation, and also for preserve our democracy and human society and human dignity. Again, we need to really share the value of inclusiveness, sustainability, openness, but additionally, diversity and equity are so many values that we have to keep in mind as a fundamentals. And we need to act differently in the sense of rediscovering the sense of community and solidarity, and preserving human touch and empowering human intimacy. So to summarize, I would say Society 5.0 was fundamental 5, 6, 7 years ago. Even today, it's more crucial to foresee and to shape together Society 5.0. I'm looking forward for your discussion there in your symposium, and looking forward what your message will be. And just to close my talk, some tips, because you are young and you'll be really the key driver of a future society, shaping Society 5.0, some tips based on my personal experiences. Before starting to talk about the society, probably you need to know yourself. And by doing that, it's stock taking your asset. What's your view from outside, and discover hidden values. That's for yourself. And also you have to create some space for experimentations. And not only just going to school or taking lessons, but you have to learn from trial and error, really personal experiences. And for that, we need to have dialogue. And find your partner outside your comfortable zone, and remember that you are not alone. And trying to be unique, to be engaged, and not only for yourself, not only your family or your nations, but really acting globally and serving society. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you'll be enjoying the discussion talking about Society 5.0. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the keynote message from Professor Yuko Harayama. We are very grateful for her wise words and her experience that she has shared with you all this morning. So I am happy to start off the next session. We have a roundtable with some wonderful speakers, wonderful panelists. So if I can invite up Professor Kiran Ravindran, Miss Liana Tang, and Miss Iris Kimizoglu up to the stage, and also our lovely moderator, Ms. Reika Tosha. So this session is on Leadership Dilemmas in Society 5.0, and I will hand over to Reika to kick us off with this. Thank you.
Okay, so a very good morning to all of you again. So I hope we can still, your attention is still on the top of the span, because we have a very interesting opening panel discussion to discuss leadership dilemmas around Society 5.0. So we heard from Professor Harayama from first hand, where did the concept originate from and what are the key features of it. So the purpose of this panel discussion is to explore some dilemmas that this concept brings up in the future, and also to give you some food for thought for the next 2 days. What kind of dilemmas can you discuss further? So let me introduce our lovely speakers here today. On my right, Professor Kiran Ravindran is sitting. He's a teacher and researcher at IE University, a business school. He teaches technology, innovation management in the MBA programs, and he's an enthusiastic observer of technology-enabled changes to business and society, and he will be primarily coming from the private sector point of view to explore the dilemmas. Then the next one sitting on the panel is Ms. Liana Tang. She's the second director at the Digital Strategy Office of the Ministry of Communications and Informations in Singapore, and she's covering futures and strategy in digital domain. And prior to joining the ministry, Liana led the Center for Strategic Futures at the Prime Minister's office in Singapore. So she's also best person to help us explore this unknown future and what might be the dilemmas. And she will be coming from the public sector point of view. And then the third speaker on this panel today is Ms. Iris Kimizoglu. She's currently serving as the Vice President of the European Students' Union. And besides her position of trust, she's also pursuing an MA degree in Political Management, Public Policy and Public Administration at the University of Duisburg at the School of Governance. So she will be representing the students here today from a European point of view. So thank you so much for joining this panel. And let me kick off the discussion. Let's explore this concept of Society 5.0. As we heard from Professor Harayama, it's supposed to be a human-centered society that balances economic development with the resolution of social problems. So we can expect that it's not just a simple shift in digital infrastructure and digitalization, but it's something that will fundamentally shift the way we work, live, and communicate with each other. So my first question to the panelists will be to deliver an opening statement that, in their opinion, what will be the key dilemmas in the future. We mean in the next 20, 25 years, so in the lifetime of the next generation, what do they foresee? Dilemmas could concern self-leadership, team leadership, or societal leadership. As we frame leadership in this program from the very beginning, we look at these three stages or three elements of leadership. So let me start first with Liana and inviting her to share some dilemmas with us.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Asef, and your organizing partners for having me. I'm very excited to be here. I've interacted with some of you when you were in Singapore, and it was a very engaging experience. I hope you also agree. I learned a lot from you as well with your very difficult questions. I was reflecting during the keynote on Society 5.0, and I think this idea of being human-centered is very important I feel for all of us that are going to be participating in this future that we're seeing as being highly digital. And there's so much to talk about, all the dilemmas that came to me as I was listening to the keynote address earlier. And there's so much to address, and I feel like we can cover a lot of that during Q&A if it does come up. So I thought for my opening, I would just talk about two dilemmas. And of course, hiding in the two dilemmas are a lot of dilemmas. And I think the first has to do with balancing the long-term uncertainties and long-term needs with short-term gains or short-term needs as well. We know that resources are finite. We also know that as a state, when you roll out legislation, a lot of these things stick. When you roll out guidelines, even though they're guidelines, they also tend to ossify certain ways of thinking. And so when you do a lot of these short-term interventions, we do also have to be very mindful about what these mean in the future and the kind of unintended consequences that could come of it. At the same time, there are also very certain things that we'll have to tackle in the future. And some of these certainties include things like a rapidly aging society, also climate change adaptation, on top of the mitigation strategies that we have to take on today. And there will be a lot of significant costs involved, and uneven costs across governments, actually, depending on how impacted you are by climate events, either extreme events or the slow burn rising sea levels that will also unevenly affect a lot of your coastal cities and coastal countries, and Singapore is one of them as well. And these come at significant costs, so balancing that with the short-term bets that you have to take to improve citizens' lives, especially when it comes to things like putting in an aggressive AI strategy so that your city and its denizens will benefit from the growth of the digital economy. That's a very difficult call to make. And how do you balance the resources that you have today and the voices of future generations as well? So there's a lot in there to unpack, and maybe we can talk about it later. And the other dilemma I wanted to bring up was balancing this need for efficiency, the benefits of efficiency that come about because of digitalization in Society 5.0, with this idea of meaning-making among society, and the fact that a lot of value in a previously seamful delivery of public services, which were not digital, could have been lost in the digitalization process. And so I like to think of this in terms of useful frictions that have been lost as we go digital. I'll just tell one story if you don't mind. So in Singapore, we've got a public housing department, and they provide very high quality housing for about 80% of the population. So your upper middle class all also live in public housing. Now, the trouble is, it does take a while for some of these public housing units to be built. Sometimes you could be waiting years for the keys to your apartment. And this public housing policy is also quite tightly tied to the public imperative of trying to form families and encourage marriage and parenthood. And so people that get first dibs on highly subsidized, really nice flats tend to be the ones who are young couples who have just registered their marriages, and when they get their flats, they start a new life. And property in Singapore is so expensive that usually before you get your own place, you're slumming it out with your parents or your in-laws, and you're just waiting for years before you get your house. So the Housing Development Board, which is the public housing department, used to wonder why the customer service experience at the moment of giving the keys out to these young couples wasn't the level of customer experience that they thought they would receive normally. And they found out that it was because they got couples in and out of their doors very quickly. In like less than 5 minutes, they were out the door with their new keys. And this experience was deeply unsatisfying because you had waited a long time. This getting your own place is a big deal, and this signifies like a new phase of life, really, really big deal. And I think this demonstrates the fact that there wasn't enough meaningful friction in that delivery of that public service. And that meaningful friction was not just about acknowledging that this was an important part of your life. It was also showing that the state that had actually worked really hard to build this new house with affordable housing for all was with you in that process and demonstrating some kind of competence and care for citizens. And that was lost because we made that process so seamless. And so I tell the story because I like how it demonstrates that a lot of public service delivery has gone to the extreme of seamlessness where we may have lost some friction that provided good value. And I'm just going to stop there because I think other panelists are going to have some nice injects as well. But we can talk a bit more about this other dilemma of efficiency versus meaningful friction.
Thank you so much for kicking it off, Liana. Now it's over to Professor Kiran to share his dilemmas with us.
So there's a quote that's misattributed to Bill Gates. We tend to overestimate what we can do in the short term and underestimate what we actually achieve in the long term. Right? So in this tiny fraction of a window, I'm hoping to appeal to you, the young people, to kind of solve all the problems that we didn't solve. Thank you, Reza, for inviting me. Thank you, Asef, for this opportunity. I've spoken to some of you. I am blown away by how much you've achieved. So it's an honor and a privilege to be here. Thank you to the speakers that have come before me, because a lot of points that I had put together seem to be reflected in earlier ideas. I like this idea of Society 5.0, and I'm kind of grappling with it because it's kind of new to me as well. It's human-centric, focused on science and technology and innovation, open, sustainable, inclusive, everybody's on board. The stuff that we don't want to do is done by robots and AI, leaving us time for being, good human beings. I like the promise, and I'm concerned we are being a little optimistic, okay? Or we might be building a utopian image. So let me think about something else that came up in Professor's presentation earlier about where we are in the society growth, right? So imagine this long timeline of about 5 million years. 5 million years ago, we separated from the apes, okay? And then for the next 4.99 million, we were throwing stones and sticks and stuff at animals and picking fruit that had fallen. We called the society 1.0. We were hunter-gatherers. 10,000 years ago, we start agriculture. Let's zoom into this 10,000 years, okay? That's now the timeline for 10,000 years. In this 10,000 years, we've been doing agriculture until about 500 years, we invent power and we have the industrialized revolution. So now, let's zoom into this 500 years. If I look at this timeline of 500 years, we've been doing the same thing until about 30 years ago where we had the internet and we said, now we are an information economy, right? Today, we're saying, okay, all that's fine, but let's think about the next society, right? In this 5 million time span, we're talking about a change that's happened yesterday. Are we perhaps being over-optimistic that we can achieve anything in the short term? Because perhaps we are still the basic animal that we were 10,000 years ago. We still feel angry, we still feel jealousy. If I'm slighted, I wage war against somebody else. I don't know how to control my impulses. I need instant gratification. So I don't think I've really grown much more. But that also does not really feel like what we feel at the moment, right? Because if we look around, despite the fact that this building is from Society 2.0, it's probably 500 years old, we're now talking to each other on devices that didn't exist when this building was built. There's electric outlets in these buildings. So something's clearly changed, right? Around the time this building was built, there was a skill that was very, very valuable. The skill of being able to read the skies, to be able to look at constellations and say what's going to happen next, to predict the future in a way. A few weeks ago, we had the blue moon, and I wanted to read the sky. And what did I do? I put on my cyborg self. I reached to the end of my arm. At the end of my arm, there's a screen. There's always a screen at the end of my arm. In fact, there's a screen at the end of my arm about 6 hours in a day. That's the global average, by the way, including for the digital divide, the haves and the have-nots, 6 hours on average a day. I look into the screen and I access the infinite power of knowledge in the internet. And I find the skill, which is to read skies, and I download this app called Star Tracker. Suddenly I point at the sky, and I know that's the moon, and the spot behind the moon is Saturn. Wait, I just did what we talked about in science fiction in The Matrix. If I wanted martial arts skills, I downloaded the skill, right? So clearly, we are in this cyborg kind of a situation where I have infinite power and ability and skills and technology all just wrapped into me to the point that I don't really think I can think for myself. I cannot get from my hotel till here without using Google Maps, even though it's one straight line. I cannot choose music, I don't have free will there. I cannot choose my life partner, the algorithm decides who I match with. Okay, so clearly we are living in this cyber social scenario, right? However, this is not all good. You and I know the cost of this. Instagram causes body dysmorphia in teenage children. Facebook and social media has created the post-truth society. WhatsApp gives you anxiety. That's why you turn off the double-check feature. Perhaps this is now our growing pains into being a good grown-up cyborg, right? So maybe in this man-machine combination, what is missing is that we're not really dominating the part of being the man or the human, right? So in this book by Brynjolfsson, who's a professor at Stanford now, called Race Against the Machine, the conclusion is the future is to race with the machine, not against the machine. So if we are racing with the machine and the machine is getting better and better, what are we doing to justify our place in the man-machine combination? Perhaps the machine will leave us alone if we don't do our part, which is to be good humans. So the emphasis on being human, being humanistic, I want to drill it down to just 3 points. And once again, I'm putting the responsibility on you to save my generation. Right? There's this, everybody jokes about ChatGPT, coming up with all kinds of hallucinations, but also ChatGPT has come up with more innovative ideas than MBA students in Wharton, as based on a paper from a few days ago, right? But that's not surprising, because nobody taught us creativity. You have courses that have all kinds of material, but not creativity. There was an emphasis on critical thinking. Nobody taught us critical thinking, which is why we believe the stuff that we see online, and even young people do. Nobody taught us compassion. We have a course on strategic competition, but nobody taught us collaborative strategy. Right? So if I were to leave as my thought piece for this part, perhaps being a better human in this human-centric society is to focus on creativity, which means to be able to make mistakes, to be experiment, but also, as just was mentioned, it is to not focus on efficiency. Creativity and efficiency are contradictory. If you want to be critical thinking, you have to be skeptical. You have to distrust what I say. You have to distrust what people told you before, and distrust stuff that people are believing just because your peers are believing it. Be open to distrusting. Compassion translates to it's okay to not win. It's okay for somebody else to win. All right? Once again, I've spoken way more than I should. I'm a professor. I tend to do this. I am optimistic that you will reach the utopia that we're kind of dreaming for. With that, thank you very much, and sorry for taking so long.
Thank you so much, Professor. So we already have like 4 dilemmas laid out: balancing long-term with short-term, balancing needs of efficiency and values, the timeline, what is it actually mean to be human, or are we already in the cyborg phase, and the dilemma between efficiency and creativity. So if you have any questions or thoughts on that you want to share, then please go to Mentimeter, and the link was posted on your Slack, and then we will show it on the screen, the QR code from time to time. And feel free to post it. It will come up here so we can ask it, and there will be also opportunity to take questions, you asking them personally on the floor. Okay, and now I invite Iris to also share her dilemmas with us from a different perspective.
Now it works. Perfect. Thank you for the invitation to Asef, and hello to all the fellow young people in the room. I will directly dive into the dilemmas, and they are connected for me a lot to higher education because that's my background, but I believe we can transfer this very much to the general political level. I mean, in digitalization, I think the biggest problem we have currently, and this is true for Europe, Asia, and any part of the world, is the digital divide. We are talking about digitalizing higher education, primary education, while many people don't even have access to digital devices. They don't have access to internet. How can we talk about digitalizing and having this transformation of society if we are leaving a lot of people behind right now that are not able to keep up and also then learn about what is behind digitalization? A second problem, and this is true especially for our generation during the pandemic, we saw that a lot, that privacy and data security rights of young people, of students specifically, were breached on a daily basis by using proctoring software, by integrating AI into it, teaching, which has a lot of positive potential. That's not what I'm trying to deny, but it has implications for our own fundamental rights that we own. And this is for sure a huge topic that we need to talk about. But what are the privacy and big data implications of the digital transformation? A third dilemma that very much follows up with that are ethical questions, especially in the use of AI. we know it has been proven that digital tools, they are software, they are trained by humans, so they are also prone to failure. They discriminate against people based on race, on gender, on disabilities. We also have the problem that they, what is the common good and who defines what the common good is? That's not what the tool does, that's what humans do. So the question of integrity comes in here as well. And then a fourth aspect I would like to bring up is the environmental impact. I read an article 2 days ago where it said that this year compared to, I guess, 2 or 3 years ago, we're using 40% more water to cool down servers that are used for digital means. I mean, it costs water to use digital, to use this thing where I have my notes on right now. So there's also an environmental impact that we need to think about. And what we see here, it's all trade-off dilemmas. We need to think about what are the gains and what are the losses, and somebody needs to make these decisions. And here, the wider implication of that is we need some form of trust into those who make the decisions. But then in the pandemic, again, we saw that trust was lost, especially in Europe, in European societies. A lot of trust was lost into decision makers because at some point people didn't feel like they were heard in the calculation anymore on the decisions made. And this brings me to the point of social dialogue. I believe that in all these trade-off dilemmas that we're discussing, we should not forget to include the stakeholders, the social parties and society as such into making these decisions and into discussing in the end what is the trade-off we are willing to do and what are the trade-offs we are not willing to give in. And for this to be possible, we need critical thinking, and here I'm coming back to my educational background. The biggest danger I see with especially AI is that we lose the capability to make decisions based on knowledge. Because if we don't learn how algorithms work, we are not able to judge upon the decisions we need to make as society and even as decision makers. Let's say decision makers in 20 years from now might be people that are sitting here right now. If we don't know how these things work, if we are deprived from being able to make knowledge-based decisions, this could go very, very wrong. So we need frameworks, we need guidelines, we need fundamental values that are integrated and anchored in these guidelines, and for this I believe we need to have engagement, and especially engagement of the youth, of young people in making these steps now towards a society 5.0 where we really center ourselves around humanity.
Interesting dilemmas, mainly around different trade-offs, what we need to give up in order to progress, at least to perceive that we progress. So that brings me back to the values, because all of you mentioned it in different contexts. So let's zoom into that one a little bit, the values. So decisions are always made based on certain value systems, and we see this changing. Some values are appreciating and some values are depreciating, being left behind. In our context, Society 5.0 is building on the values of inclusion, sustainability, and human-centeredness. So how do you see this in the future, in the time of the next generation? What values will appreciate more and what will be maybe less so important? And let me add the question in here as well that came on the Mentimeter. The participant, I will ask you, our participant, to stand up who posted this question, and then ask the other ones to please put your name and country when you post the question. So the question was that reflecting on the values versus efficiency dilemma that Liana raised first, as well as the compassion and being able to fail. Do you see these values as neoliberal, capitalist values, as the opposite of human-centered economic model? So when you reflect on the values, could you please also incorporate this? And then I invite Liana first.
So the Singapore model is very much trying to balance the delicate balance between capitalist and socialist. I don't know if you're familiar with the model of governance, but the result of this is that at least in the state machinery, there is a very, very conscious awareness that we need that economic growth for survival and to have a place in the world because we're small, and that's where we bring a lot of value to the world. But at the same time, as a city-state, we have very little space and a very dense population that's also very diverse. So it is also very important to put the needs of the domestic population up front. And as you can imagine, it's very difficult then to have that balance of how do we remain open for business and open to the world in terms of talent and capital flows, at the same time provide a home for people who can see that they can raise families, lead a fulfilling life, retire, and really also realize their potential. Singapore citizens don't have the luxury of moving to a suburban or rural city when they're older. And so how do we then provide that sort of life satisfaction and ensure that people can also realize their aspirations while we maintain a thriving city-state? So as you can imagine, that's a very difficult dilemma, but the good thing is that it has been a principle of governance in Singapore. And what that means is there is a lot of work to provide, to really also take in what people need and want and how they feel about that openness. And a lot of that's being done also through consultation that also opens pathways for inclusion, to talk about what it is that you feel you're being left behind while all this other stuff is happening. And that comes at a cost as well. But this is where, and I think your typical technocrat will say, yeah, that comes at a cost in terms of time. It takes a long time to run public consultations, to make sure that everyone's represented, to make sure that everyone has a say, at the same time that everyone has the information they need to deliberate on some of these difficult issues. So for example, an issue that's always on the table in Singapore is, as we remain open as an economy, how do we make sure that there are also good jobs for Singaporeans? And that speaks to a fear of growing inequality, an inequality that could manifest in different textures, right? Whether it's about maybe foreigners earning higher wages than locals, and nobody wants that. So how do we consult to and also do engagement in a way that builds empathy both ways? And so it comes at a cost of time and efficiency in terms of making decisions, in terms of bringing in new business, creating new jobs. But at the same time, I think there is a growing appreciation that where some people see cost, others see value. And they're basically the same coin, just different sides. And I think what the solution for me in this situation is to see the value in that additional cost, right? And that you're playing a long game here. In all these public consultations and engagements, you're not only building the objectives, working towards the objectives that you set out to in terms of bringing everybody along when you pursue certain policies, but you're also building the muscle within the state machinery, plus also all your NGO partners and community partners that you have to work with in this process, in order for it to be part of a system and a part of a process in the long term. And I think when you see the value in that lens, that everyone's building capacity here, because we know that the future is going to be very uncertain and very difficult and complex, at least that substrate and capacity is being built at this time. So while in the immediate term it looks like a compromise and an extreme cost in terms of the speed of doing things, there is a lot of value there. And I think then the challenge for states is to focus on where that value is and then how to build that.
Thank you so much, Leah. Now it's over to Professor Kiron, also reflecting on values and trade-off. And let me add on another question in your case. It's from Rembert from Belgium. So he's asking whether continuous economic development is required for continuous development of societies, and is it needed for a human-centered society?
So these are big questions. I think the first question, if I understand correctly, is among these values of inclusion, sustainability, and human-centric, which might grow, which might not grow. Is that, if I understand correctly? So, I don't attempt to predict the future, but I'm trying to look at the mechanisms that fuel the interest in these values, right? So there's all this pressure on corporates to focus on sustainability, to address sustainability. There's regulatory pressure. And fixing the sustainability issue is an engineering problem. So my bet is that this will kind of get solved. We've had a problem with food, with medicine over time. We've figured out technological structural shifts that have enabled us to produce food much better, solve a bunch of diseases and so on, right? So I'm less concerned about sustainability. There is a lot of attention on inclusion. We're not there yet, we're not even remotely close. But there is attention. So I think perhaps we will get to the inclusion part as well. We might be not clear on what we want to include. That's another problem. Do we want to include only diversity in terms of geography, in terms of skin tones, in terms of sexuality? Can we handle neurodivergent people in this auditorium? You know? So this kind of specifics on inclusion we might take longer. But the third is the part that I'm really concerned about, this notion of human centricism, because I think perhaps we don't even know what it means. I like what you mentioned earlier about beneficial friction, right? So I want this process not to be more efficient. I want this to be slower so that I can make this a human-centric process. And my guess is, abstracting away from that particular process, the stock market is generally not favorable to things that are not efficient. Right? So if you go efficient, if you go cost-cutting, if you lay off people, that's good news for the stock market. And as I say this, I see the hypocrisy in it, because my pension funds are linked to the stock market. Right? So I want companies to do bad things so that I can live well in my old age. And therefore, I do not see how we might get to human centricism easily. I don't know the mechanism. And about economic progress, I like the question, and I want to flip it around. I don't think we need economic progress. Economic progress will happen. What might hopefully change is the measure of economic progress. Right now, the measure of economic progress is GDP or stock market performance. If we can change that to a more holistic measurement system, maybe we might focus on the stuff that matters a bit more. And I'm sure you know about this notion of, the under-measured labor, like women taking care of children at home, which doesn't have a bill and therefore it doesn't feature into the GDP. If we figure out a better economic model of having metrics that measure total contribution of labor in some meaningful manner, I think the alignment between progress and benefit to society might be a little bit more clear. Have I addressed your question?
Thank you so much. And now it's over to Iris to also reflect on the issue of values. And for you, I would like to also add on a question. Because you mentioned also the environmental considerations, which is it's a very good point, because we talk about human-centered society, but where does that leave the environment? And then the question is, where do you place the immediate urgent concern of climate change as we desperately seek more and more tech-based solutions?
Okay, I will start with the first part of the question, and I will go into the question of the neoliberalism also a bit. I mean, the problem with economic growth and the nowadays very prominent neoliberal idea is that it's based on the idea of endless resources. But we know we don't have endless resources in this planet, so the very foundation of how economy works and is perceived nowadays is wrong, which connects to the climate question later on. So if this is wrong, then we need to look into what is right and how do we need to transform this. And I believe we might need to add maybe certain factors, but I think just adding things or just changing small things in in the theory is not gonna do the trick in the end, because it's a very foundational underlying issue. So we need a shift in thinking, and we need to shift away from that. This also connects, I mean, it's very interesting that we have the Europe-Asia meeting here, basically. The neoliberal principle that was very prominent also here in Europe for a long time, and still is, I mean, we are only able to achieve what we are achieving in growth because we are depriving people in other areas of the world from their fundamental rights. People in Asia are suffering because economic growth in Europe is being pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed. And now bringing this back to the climate question as well, this connects to this because we are living off the climate. And big tech is also living off the climate. And that's what I said before. We need to look into the trade-offs we are doing and to really think about how far do we want to go and where is the point of needing to stop and realizing, okay, we would gain something very great if we would go with this technology, but the trade-off for the climate, for our environment is so big that in the end, I mean, is it worth it to have whatever kind of technology if then in 500 years we are extinct? You know, then we can also let it be and not care anymore if we are going into the direction of extincting ourselves, basically. But yeah, again, what are the fundamental values that we want to really set? That's a question that doesn't have a right and wrong answer in a sense. It's a matter of discussion with society. And I think we need to go into a direction where we not only do these kind of discussions with our community or our nation state or even like the continent, but that needs to be a global discussion because it's so interlinked that we really like. We need to see the global dimension behind what these values are, and also maybe there's a middle ground that we can reach by exchanging, because in Europe we have a big emphasis on individual rights, while in Asia the communitarian thinking is way more prominent than here, and maybe it's somewhere in the middle where the right way lies. I don't know.
Thanks. You bring up this point that I was also reflecting on, this idea of whether we even fundamentally agree on what we think are fundamental values. And maybe this is also an opportunity to say, I feel like I disagree with you on sustainability will solve itself because technology, woo. I think that's also what a lot of people say about aging. Oh, we'll be fine because we'll have robots looking after us. I'm not sure. And I think as with many people, you hope that if we solve energy, we'll solve everything, and so sustainability wouldn't be an issue. But the point is to say that you have to work really hard together to tackle this, right? And I think the trouble is then, how do we get to a consensus that this is a thing that we should all work towards? Like you mentioned, there are countries that can do this because you got rich on X in the past, and there are countries that haven't even reaped those gains at all, and are even trying to transition from being a third world country to self-actualization in their own ways, and to expect a green transition from cities like this or countries like this is unreasonable, because unless you provide a lot of help, right? Because even that green transition for developed countries is an impossible challenge quite often. And so I think fundamentally agreeing even that sustainability, what that looks like and whether that needs to be a goal today, I think is a challenge, because we've been arguing also on a values level, right? And I think that talks to the original question of how these values are going to evolve. I think something we need to reflect on is whether the person next to you really shares some of these fundamental values. I think when you say, we have to do this because think of future generations, you're being irresponsible today. A lot of people could very well, that in their inside voice, say, why should I bother about future generations? And so I think if you don't get that agreement at a very fundamental level, then that global cooperation that's required to tackle something quite as complex as sustainability will not happen in the way that we hope.
Thank you so much. And then let me invite now our young leaders to ask some questions in person. So if we have the moving mics, then we will collect questions, like 3 at a time. So those of you who have posted, please feel free to ask for the mic and ask your questions in person. Abby, Siptine, Alex from Sweden, Tika, Mayabi, Matthew, Colette, feel free to go ahead and ask for the mic. Over there.
Hello, my name is Klotat Paibunukungkit. I'm a participant from Thailand. I have a question about with the democracy have a very short-term vision when it comes to solving the achieving the solution to please the majority of the people. How we could to achieve as such in this high individualistic society and very focused on the personal interest? How we could achieve a more strategic plan and collective solution into the long-term plan?
Thank you. Very good question. And we collect 2 more. Hands up. Here and there.
Yes. Hi. It's Alden Creo from Spain here. And, well, just to give a bit of context before the question itself, you probably know that, like, creating an AI model or, like, fine-tuning an AI model takes a lot of resources. So like I'm speaking about dollars, right? Like you need like, I don't know, maybe, I don't know, $20,000 if you want to like build your AI model. And I think that's, well, it really poses a big threat when it comes to inclusion of everyone. Like we've been speaking about that. And I think that, well, if you think, for example, I don't know, like the invention of the press, you print a book and everyone can read that. But what happens right now is like accessibility to AI is quite restricted, I think, because like it takes a lot of money to actually use it. So I would love to gather your inputs on how you think we should be dealing when it comes to making AI accessible to everyone. Should it be like a fundamental right to access this, or should we not do anything and just leave it up to corporations, or what do you think?
Okay, thank you. And then the third question.
Hi, my name is Dimitar Ferdinando from Bulgaria. Thank you so much for the opportunity to ask a question. Thanks so much for the very insightful discussion panel that we've had. I think my question kind of builds upon what Colette asked about the individual and values and how it's different in Asian countries and in Europe. It's more building upon the during COVID-19, as you said, there were very unpopular decisions that were made from governments that were very like mostly talking about the collective and the value for the collective rather than the individual value. So a lot of people in Europe had a lot of issues with that. So my question here is, when do you know, and how would you say you know when to make an unpopular decision? When should you go against what most of the people think and feel, especially in democratic countries, in which your place in power, your place in government really depends on the popularity of what you do. But sometimes, especially if you want to be a leader, feel like you need to step up and take those unpopular decisions. How do you know when to make those? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, let's work with these questions first. So I think first I invite Liana to, again, because Singapore is a country which is very good at long-term planning. So we would like to hear your thoughts on that, on Colette's question from Thailand. But if you wish to reflect on the collective and individual question from Dimitar, also feel free to do so. And then Kiron and Iris on inclusivity and the collective individual differences in Asia and Europe.
Yeah, that's a difficult one because, Reka, as you rightly mentioned, I must have said this to some of you before, that a lot of the reason why Singapore has been able to do such long-term planning is because it's enjoyed long-term political stability for many, many years. And with a dominant party system, that is the luxury that you can enjoy without having to care about politicking. Not so much. And I think that is definitely a big concern, and that is something that worries Singaporean civil servants as well, because you've built a machinery that is so reliant on consensus, and that you so far have a population that also broadly agrees with thinking long term. And the fear is that that will shift quite quickly as long as politics becomes a lot less stable. I think one of the plus points that we've had as a result of enjoying this long-term political stability is that long-term thinking has been inoculated in society. There is a sense of we can't just do things for the short term because Singapore is our home and we've got nowhere else to go. It's very small. And I think a lot of these vulnerabilities are very front and center in the lived experience of citizens in the city-state. That said, I feel like that could also switch overnight very quickly, especially if you lose something as important as trust in institutions. And you do see a decline in trust globally. In Singapore, we're still okay, but we can't be complacent to think that that wouldn't affect us. That is a global driving force towards a mistrust in institutions, something that I'm sure you would be discussing in the course of the program as well. And so I think the challenge then for a government like us, where we are trying to be prepared for a potential future where there might be a bit of the political instability, is how do you build the substrates today to be resilient for that future? So one I've already talked about quite a bit has to do with engagement and citizen consultation, but I think systematizing it is very important, putting it into process, making it a requirement, making sure that anyone that works in a policy-making role has the instincts and the capabilities to be very inclusive when it comes to policymaking and very data-driven, knowledge-driven, has the critical thinking skills to ask the right questions, to understand what the right problems are to solve, will provide some kind of ballast for eventually, if the political powers do cave into populism, wanting to push certain things over others, there has to be a counterforce. So that's one, but that's in the state machinery. The other is in the community machinery, and I think that's where a lot of you come in as well when you work in public sector but not in governments, right, or local councils. A lot of you work in community groups, and building that community capability is also super important. Like, do you as citizens and members of a democratic machinery, do you know your duties? Do you know what you can do, what your rights are, where information is, and what the channels are to the state machinery and how you can work together? And I think that also harks to maybe this other question on private sector players, which will be touched on later. How does that community sector look like in this future where, and for many countries, it is the situation today, where there is a lot of political instability? And so depending on the context, your operating context, these three players have to have different balances, right? The state, the community, and businesses. And I think wherever you are, knowing what that balance is in your system will be very important as a ballast against a lot of this short-term thinking that could happen.
Thank you, Liana. Then I invite Iris to start with Aldan's question from Spain on resources needed, how to enhance inclusivity, and also channeling in here another question from Elaine from Malaysia. She says, we have been talking about inclusiveness since decades ago, even when we were in Industry 3.0, then Connectivity 4.0, we are now looking at Society 5.0, but where are we? Have we done enough, and what needs to be done more? So first Iris and then Kiran.
I mean, when it comes to the question of how much money should we invest into technology and then into an AI, and where is maybe also there a limit to be reached, it's in the end, it depends on the societal consensus, or it should depend on that, in my opinion. It does not always. But of course, I mean, it costs a lot of money to develop anything in the digital sphere, not only because the people who work in it know that what they are worth in salaries, but also because it takes a lot of servers, it takes a lot of energy, etc., pp. to have these tools. And yeah, I mean, in the end, again, maybe we are able to achieve something great if we invest all our resources into digital tools. But then the question is, how is it really worth it, or should we have used the resources instead right now, right here, for something else from which society would have benefited, and be it money for homeless people to build their houses, you know? I don't think that digitalization is the only thing that matters to solve our problems, and it's a trade-off, really, again. And what was the second part? Oh yeah, no, I mean, with inclusion, I believe that a lot of people want to believe that we have come a long way with inclusivity, but the fact is that the same people that were deprived of a lot of privileges 50 years ago and 100 years ago and 200 years ago are still deprived of certain privileges. Access to education is extremely unequal. Due to that, access to employment markets is extremely unequal. If you have been homeless or jobless for a year, for example, in Germany, you have almost no possibility to ever make it back into a normal living situation. So, and there, I think especially we Europeans should look into how community has a much bigger role in Asian communities. I think we are very individualistic, and this is important for the individual rights perspectives. But then again, the value of community, we have lost it a bit, and I think we regained it a little bit during COVID, at least in the beginning. But then, as the colleague from Bulgaria said, rightfully though, after some time people got a bit sick of the talk about we need to look into what's good for the community and not the individual. And that's why I can only emphasize once again, I believe the best way to move forward for our societies is to have more engagement of the people that make up the society. If decisions are made by the decision makers on the highest level, then the people don't feel a sense of ownership about these decisions. And that's where it's at. If you include people into making unpopular decisions, they will be accepted because they were included into making the decision. If you make these unpopular decisions without including the public, that is where the problems get created, because then nobody had to take ownership and responsibility in making decisions, and then it's also very easy to criticize decision makers. So for me, stakeholder involvement is the #1 thing when it comes to political decision making. If you really want to be sure that people are on board, you will never have 100% of the people on board, but if you want to have the majority of the people on board, you need to include them.
So I think I'm addressing the question AI and digital divide. Is that
resources needed?
Resources needed. So to paint a slightly more optimistic view, not everything is bad. In the sense, yes, there is a digital divide in terms of connectivity, there's a digital divide in terms of access to knowledge, there's a digital divide in terms of algorithm. There's something called digital colonialism, which means all these algorithms that are trained on my value systems might not work in your values. It might not be fair. But then we don't even have a common definition of what is fairness. There are at least 5 theories of what is bias and what is unfair in at least in algorithms, the stuff that I know of. However, when I say not all is bad, we do have to admit and agree that there is a whole lot of access to artificial intelligence that we get for free that has become commonplace now. Like we turn on the light, you can turn on artificial intelligence that gives me access to a building, artificial intelligence that helps me navigate, artificial intelligence that tells me when the bus is going to arrive. That is a predictive algorithm, right? And all of this is being made free. There is an interesting story I heard. When the Atari made the Pong game in the 80s, this is a little black screen with little white bands that go up and down. It shoots a little ball between this one side and the other. It's ping pong or pong. Maybe you've heard of this or seen this. The hardware that was used to make this game operated at 2 petaflops. That's 2 million billion operations a second. That was without using software. It was all hardware. This computing capability has been increasing tenfold every year. Today, the LLMs use 10,000 petaflops. That's 10,000 million billion operations a second. How much have you paid to use ChatGPT? Yes, there is a cost in society and all that, but we have access to it for free. So the reason we have access to this for free, and the reason this is not locked up within the gates of NASA or university IT centers, is because it's cheaper to produce a lot of these computations today, right? Why is our Earth getting burnt up in the process of my Spotify playlist recommending me another song? Because we consume more. The technology has gotten much better. It takes much less energy for the same kind of operations. But we've gotten very short-term thinking. We've gotten very short-termist in thinking about how much can you consume this. So it comes back to this notion of, are we making our decision in a collaborative manner? Are we making a decision with the intention of sustainability? Going back to my point earlier, I don't believe we will solve the sustainability point by a magic wand. But if I had to bet on one of these 3 horses, and only one of these 3 horses, I would bet on sustainability, right? Because I think there is a little bit more engineering solution. The other part, the part where we have to actually change our behavior, is the part where I feel we are still stuck in some kind of an ape-man stage, Sorry.
Lovely, thank you.
I was supposed to be optimistic.
You're challenging us, Kiran. Okay, if you could also quickly reflect on Dimitar's question, please. So he was saying that COVID-19 showed us that there were very different responses and policies in Asia and Europe, and we like to say that in Asia there were more collective responses versus more individual in Europe. What's your take on that, and what does it tell us about Society 5.0 in the future? So
it made me reflect on a particular incident in Spain. I was in Spain. We had a 10-week lockdown. You couldn't even go for that 1 kilometer exercise, whatever. You could go to the supermarket and you had to go alone. My friend and I would clandestinely meet at the bakery line to kind of say, hey, hello, as if we were 2 different families and 2 different... It was a very strict lockdown, right? But during one of these days, there was a piece on the news clip where there was a protest where they would beat pots and pans yelling anti-government slogans, right? One of these guys was in a convertible. He was driving, and you could see he reeked of opulence. There was a lady in the car who was the domestic help. She was the one beating the pots and pans, claiming you needed access to let them come to your work and so on. And the news commentary was, wait, this is the first time some of these people are not getting to show their entitlement. Because just like I'm locked in and nobody can come and clean my house, the one that did not have this problem ever in their life is now faced with the possibility that they too are subject to the same rules that I'm subjected to, and that's not tolerable, right? And so the response to that, of course, all the governments had to give in sooner or later was, to make commerce happen, we had to start making exceptions. To make commerce happen, to make certain people happy, we had to say, okay, it's okay if we take a calculated risk on other people's lives. I don't know the answer to your question. I don't know what is the right way to do this. There is a lot of evidence that community-based governance. In fact, in 2010, the Nobel Prize was given to somebody who said communal governance is actually a better form of governance than contractual governance, right? So there is this value in community. We've seen historically how communities tend to last longer. Civilizations that have a stronger social tie tends to survive longer in terms of even economics, in terms of trade and progress. So perhaps that is the model. And perhaps we don't know that model in the Western Hemisphere and the Northern Hemisphere. And perhaps we will learn from them in the future. But I don't know what is the right answer to what is the right approach.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, we don't have to conclude on the right approach. Is this the purpose of the Young Leaders Summit, to discuss these, and then everyone will have their own takeaway. Let us collect another round of questions, please. I see some coming in the Mentimeter, very exciting ones around how countries can collaborate in Asia and Europe, especially more developed, less developed. So hands up, please, who's ready to ask questions? We have also questions, what young leaders could, okay. Svea, 1, 2, 3. Let's take 2 from this part and 2 from that part, please. Yeah. Yes.
Thank you, Reka, and thank you everyone for the great presentation. My name is Andre Orlando. I'm representing Indonesia, but I'm currently working in the World Bank based in Australia, Sydney. My question is talking about my work actually in the government for the PNG and Pacific Islands. So we're giving World Bank aims to end extreme poverty for the developing countries by giving financing and also giving the technical assistance to the countries. And the problem with the developing countries are the ownership or the capacity of the government itself. I've heard from Ms. Liana, it's a very great presentation from Singapore as one of the developed countries in the world. But I want to ask you about takeaways, how to actually share the knowledge for the developing countries that is not have a capacity like all the developed countries in the world. Because sometimes they asked about money, they asked about financial support, but it's not based from their needs. It's not based on what the community. So it's, at the end of the day, the implementation is just about the money and not the good performance of the project. So my question is again, how actually the developed countries share the knowledge and give the capacity building for the countries that are not in a good capacity. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Orlando. Then another question from this part.
Well,
Thank you for the suggestion. Yes, it's difficult from C, but it's right. Yeah, remember quicker. We will wait a bit more. Yeah. Can we give it to Svea over here in green jacket?
No, I think she's okay, sorry. Thank you. Thank you. It's such an interesting panel. I'm very intrigued. The capitalism question was mine. I just forgot to put my name on it. Sorry. I'm wondering, because we're talking a lot about technological advancement. We're talking a lot about how technology improves our lives, and I don't think this is something anybody would disagree on. What I'm thinking about is how much, and I would touch upon the consumerism aspect of it that you mentioned, which I think is a major factor, is instead of technology becoming what it was, I think, imagined, which was it will take over the tediousness of labor and liberate us to actually live more enriched lives, we turned it into an extra tool of enforcing productivity as the pinnacle of social values, which is something I would like to challenge, that productivity is a basic social value, because when you put that in a wider context, for example, disability, this becomes very interesting as a discussion. So my question is, are we living in this illusion that we're creating a society which is thriving because of technology, when in fact we're using most of technology to make lives easier, but not in a way that's enriching always, but we're also just displacing a lot of the uncomfortable or dangerous labor, not to technology, but to marginalized groups. Europe exports dangerous labor to Asia. Jobs which men didn't like at one point got given to women, and another point got given to disabled people. So we're just pushing down the things that we don't want to do and shoving it to the margins while also touting technological advancement. So I'm not anti-technology, far from it, but I do think it's a much more complex conversation when we do tend to forget that a lot of the technology we're using comes down to, a new app. There's a cost to that app. So I would just love to hear your thoughts on it, because all three of you are very interesting.
Thank you so much, Freya. So then to be completely inclusive, we take one more question from a lady from Asia and a gentleman from Europe. Lady from Asia.
Thank you so much. This was such an enlightening panel, and I'm so happy to be here. So my question is focused on sustainability. We have spoken about it a little bit. Just to give you some context, I'm a gender rights activist from Bangladesh. My work is based around against GBV. And I wanted to focus on something called tech-facilitated gender-based violence. Of course, we're talking about technological advancement, but in my country, I would say even just access to technology is still a big development here. And in one of my research, I was conducting research on after the peak pandemic lockdowns, access to technology or the internet really increased in Bangladesh. But with that, simultaneously, there was a huge uptick in cases of tech-facilitated gender-based violence, especially against women and gender-diverse people in my country and also around the world. So I would say in the context of the SDGs, we're still struggling to reach those goals. So maybe technological advancement would, of course, help us to reach some of the goals, for example, in terms of innovation, and it supports many different goals. But if I focus on some SDGs, like SDG 5 against GBV, maybe we're taking a step back. So is this like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, or 1 step forward, 1 step back for us when it comes to, again, like the other navigator who was just speaking, I'm not anti-technology at all. I was just wondering, what do you think, like, how do we decide on what the trade-off should be? And how do we ensure that there is a balance when it comes to technological advancement in terms of the different goals that we want to reach? Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, maybe. And the gentleman from Europe, please. It was a quick hand there, yes.
Thank you very much for your presentation and your answers. So I would like to talk about global competition. Today, if a company or a country wants to succeed, they need to invest a lot in energy, in technology, and they will create, doing that, a lot of negative externalities. So my question is, in this context, how can you create a framework to break this vicious cycle and create the opportunities in which a country or a company does not have to invest a lot in technology and energy and in, and to create negative externalities without the fearful risk of losing its place forever? Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. So we start answering from Iris' side in this order. So Iris, if you could go for the question from Mayabi, Bangladesh tech-enabled gender violence, and then Liana next on Orlando's question, how to get assistance right among countries, and then also if you want to chime into other questions, feel free to do so, and we'll go in this order. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, because I thought about bringing it up myself and decided against that. So good you did that. Yeah, I mean, gender-based violence is a problem that is as old as humanity. I mean, look at the Bible. If you follow that, it starts already there with gender-based violence in the first pages, you know. But we're living today, and I mean, it's not only like hate speech or whatever. This is one part of the gender-based violence that happens online, but then you also have child pornography that escalated in the past years, especially, and these kind of things. So, but the question is this really something that is unique to the digital sphere, or is it something that is a problem of society, and digitalization is part of society, so it just spills over? And I believe we need specific solutions for the digital sphere, because it works very differently. You have much more anonymity. It can be way harder to find the people who start certain things. So there need to be specific solutions for these kind of matters. But in the end, for me, the underlying issue is the same as when we look into the non-digital sphere, and that is that, I don't know, there is no good and wrong people. There will always be people who do bad things for whatever reason. And so the question is really, how do we prevent people from engaging in gender-based violence? And it's a matter of education. It's a matter of having long-term strategies also from a governmental side, how to tackle this societal issue. And it's been, for a long time, it was overlooked. And I mean, we are still living in a patriarchal world. So I guess we will continue to have these problems, unfortunately, for a long time. So I don't really have an answer to the general question, but I for sure believe that this needs to become a bigger focus in Europe, at least, like in the last few years, and especially currently in the European Union, the Spanish presidency of the Council, they have it currently, and before them it was last half year, it was the Czech. They really put gender-based violence also to the forefront of what they want to tackle in the European Union over the next year. And the question of digitalization comes up, but it is not very prominent, and it should probably become more prominent. I think many people still don't understand the extent to which the digital transformation affects women and people who are, not male, so non-binary people, and how deeply rooted that is. We have darknet issues, we have always had them, but they are increasing now with AI. So I guess we need to speak up more about it and demand it also more from our decision makers on political level, that they start to really look into this and come up with frameworks how to tackle gender-based violence in the digital sphere.
Thank you so much. And a quick one.
Yeah, maybe to add on, it's really hard for regulators to both figure out and also decide when to step in to regulate platforms, right? And I think the reason is not so much because we don't know what harms exist on these platforms. There are very clear harms, especially when the lines are very, very clear. Once you've crossed this, you've committed a crime. Gender-based violence, any sort of violence between groups, all that is a truth. It happens, and when it happens, there must be recourse, there must be justice, but most importantly, there must be upstream prevention. And I will argue that traverses digital, right? This is also very much a physical, real-life problem that society has had, that has leaked into the digital platforms and has been amplified just by virtue of the nature of these platforms. I think the good thing is that today, I don't think any tech giant can, with any sense of good conscience, tell you that they haven't been responsible for a lot of social problems, mental health problems, threats to democracy, oppression of certain voices. And I think that the good thing is that we've all come to that space, right? I remember going through the years of feeling like working for Facebook might be quite cool. And I mean, I don't know how everyone else feels about this right now, but I feel like, some of the attitudes have changed. They're a lot more nuanced now. And I think that maybe speaks to an earlier question on what do we do with then corporations, having all the power, and what about the people? And so I think the sacrifices that a lot of people have gone through in the past few years, that have come at extreme costs to certain countries and the state of their democracy and their youth, I think has at least reaped the gains of a broad awareness that there are these harms and that there are these power differences, and it's up to governments, society, public sector, private sector organizations to work together on this. And I think the generations going into the workforce also have a power. And we do see that new generations of young people going into work for many platforms on a very values-based, use very values-based decisions. And I hope that this could also be a force for good in the future. And like any technology, there's always upsides and downsides. I think there are countless people whose lives have been saved because of technology. The fact that they were teenagers that didn't know who to reach out to because they were feeling depressed and suicidal, have been able to reach out to total strangers on the internet who have helped them. And people who have, with the help of technology, really felt more included. And we've seen ideas and real stories of this from the gaming world all the way up to, I think, more recent examples where you know, suddenly a lot of people can participate in the economy because of tools like ChatGPT. And the inclusive effect and all the positives that come with technology shouldn't be undermined as well. And we could also be solving a lot of inclusion issues with technology. And so I think as responsible participants of this discussion, we do have to acknowledge that there have been many lives that have been changed for the better because of it. So it doesn't really fully answer the question, but really at least presents a stronger case for that dilemma that we all need to tackle together. So now to maybe talk about some of the more pointed questions that I think I need to answer. One was a question on how should developed countries help developing countries. I think very importantly, developed countries need to not impose or inadvertently exercise some sort of imperialism on developing countries by, you know, in the form of technical assistance, put in all kinds of conditionalities that just then don't really do any good in the long term for developing countries. I think that's a very fundamental principle that I think maybe doesn't get talked about enough. So I think that's one. And really also understanding the context of developing countries. Every country has a different challenge. And every country has a different power structure, right? And to speak to the specific point on, well, what if there's limited state capacity? What can we do? You know, you're just maybe most of the time you're just asking for money, but that doesn't make a difference if state capacity is limited and you can't make a big difference. Completely agree. And maybe the solution then is to work with that country to figure out where the power structures are. I think we can fundamentally question the assumption that all system change must be done at a state level. There are many other institutions that play an important part. Not to say which is better, I think it's also unreasonable for any one of us to put a value judgment on which institution needs necessarily to play that role. In theory, the state is supposed to have like all citizens' interests in mind. I think it's naive for us to assume that that's the case in many countries. And so the question is, which are the powerful institutions in these different countries, and then how to figure out a contextual solution and aid in these contexts, I think is very important.
Thank you so much, Liana, and Kiran, over to you. A very short one, okay? 1.5 minutes.
Sorry.
So two quick examples, and then I'll try and address your question. On gender-based violence, I don't even attempt to understand the complexity of the problem, but there are two examples that I've heard of. One is about 10 years ago in Egypt, there was a website called harris.org, where people could basically tweet or send an SMS saying they have been harassed in this particular location. That would show up on a map. It's a very grassroots solution. Police will not involve in this because they just didn't care. But it was like a woman-to-woman advisory network, right? So there is a low-cost, free solution that came up there. Today, there is plenty of AI capability in detecting hate speech in text. We might see this in the near future being put in real time. On countries offering help to other countries, to some extent there is democratization of capacity because of access to cheap computing capability through cloud computing. Yes, I admit there is a cost to all of this. However, the capability exists. Today, I know of a small website in a little town in Argentina so that lost pets can be found using a free app development software, free capability on Amazon Web Service, free website development template. Basically, this service would not have existed if it weren't for the access to high quality computing capability accessible for free. But going back to this issue that was, the bigger question, is productivity a bad measure? I completely agree with you. Efficiency is a bad measure. Not everything is efficient. There is this classic claim, you cannot make the process of giving birth more efficient by putting 4 women on the job, right? Or some 17th century Mozart composition still requires 4 musicians to play it. It cannot be made more efficient. I only have a couple of suggestions. There are these 4 books, maybe you're familiar with this. One is Factfulness by Hans Rosling. The other is Utopia for Realists. Third is Poor Economics. And the last is Donut Economics. These are 4 books that I love that challenge our thinking about GDP, economic progress, and maybe put a more humanistic point of view. What one can do, like I said, we put all the responsibility on you, right? Well, what you can do perhaps is to vote with your wallet and vote with your feet. Just don't buy the stuff from companies that are not responsible. That's it, period. I just don't need the service, right? And the other is to vote with your feet. Right now, there are still companies that can manage to hire really good talent to make us click buttons, right? And perhaps skills can be deployed somewhere else. So with those words, I feel that there is some kind of a way out of the situation.
Thank you so much for the reflections, and with this we came to the end of our time for this panel discussion, so I would just like to ask all of you to say one sentence, a message to the young leaders, reflecting back to where we started from, the dilemmas. What dilemmas would you like to draw their attention to discuss in the next 2-3 days, just in one sentence to close off the discussion and bring it all together? Who would like to start? Who's ready?
I can go.
Okay.
3 C's. C for creativity, C for critical thinking, C for compassion.
Think about these. Okay.
That's all you need.
Since you're all young, and I think this is important, I think about self-actualization and how you want to reach your potential while doing something good for society.
Maybe I will take a more negative outlook, but it has a positive implication. We cannot solve everything, and especially not as an individual. Like, we don't have that power, even though people always want to make us believe that. But in coming together and in raising our voices together, we can be heard. So as young people, I think that is really our role, to critically engage with those who have the power and to make sure that we are not overlooked and not overheard. And I think that's what you're doing anyway, so good for you.
Thank you. Big round of applause to our panelists. Thank you so much. And then panelists will be around today for sure, some of them also tomorrow, so feel free to go and meet them, greet them, and talk more about these issues. And now, coffee break is ready, I think. Over to Freya to tell us how to get there.
Thank you. There we go. Thank you to our wonderful speakers. I think they deserve one more round of applause, everyone. Thank you. And with that, this point, we are coming to the end of the public program. So I know there's a number of local University of Salamanca students representatives who joined us today for the open public program. Thank you very much for joining us. And also thank you to everyone who joined us on the live stream today, because the end of the live stream. But we will be back again tomorrow for the sessions also live on Asef's YouTube channel. So thank you very much to everyone who joined us online. For everyone here in person, all our Asef YLS 5 participants, you can now go for your coffee break. The volunteers will help guide you upstairs to the second floor. and you can enjoy your break, enjoy lots of takeaways from this conversation. Please be back here for 12 o'clock for the final session in this beautiful room this morning.